Hello everyone, and in this video I have a Spooky's House of Jumpscares ink painting fan art. I originally uploaded this in summer 2015, so this is another old video getting a nice new polish of paint and a voiceover to go along with it. So I'm starting off by covering Spooky and her friends with some masking fluid, and then I do a couple layers of some yellow ink washes. I'll build it up a couple layers at a time until I like what I see. And now I'm adding a bit more masking fluid in areas that I want to keep just yellow. So basically Spooky will be white when I remove the masking fluid, and then the stuff that I'm doing right now will be yellow when I remove the masking fluid. I want certain areas to stay yellow, so instead of just painting around them, I decided to cover them up with masking fluid so I don't even have to worry about them. So with this video especially, you can tell how I really love to layer with inks. Actually, for most paints I really like to layer, but for inks especially, I will just layer all these different colors on top of each other until I get what I want. Honestly, with almost every way I color, I like to layer. I think I like to layer a little too much. I don't know. I just like the way it looks, and I just like the process of layering, and I like building up color as I go along. Though for this particular painting, I did get really frustrated painting it. And the entire time I was doing it, I didn't like it at all. I was so frustrated. I hated this painting when I was doing it. It took me a couple sittings to get this done because I was just miserable painting it. Whenever I look at it, I was like, oh god, I hate this so much. But in the end, I kind of liked it in the end. It grew on me, and now looking back almost over a year later, the painting itself is pretty decent. I mean, there's a lot of things I could do better, but I don't know. I think in the sky and in other areas I got a little too dark, a little too black in those areas, and it covered up some of the colors that I worked so hard to layer down. It was a little disheartening working on this. Made a few mistakes here and there, and maybe I was just being a big baby when I was coloring this, or painting this I should say. Actually no, I was definitely being a big baby now I go back and look at it. And honestly, even though I did think I put a little too much black in there, you can still see a lot of the colors I layered on in certain areas, so it's not completely gone. Though I was being really finicky and a big pain in the ass back then. I was like, no, too much black, it's terrible, it's all ruined, and it honestly wasn't that bad. But what can you do? I'm actually trying to desperately put colors back in. You can see I'm putting some reds and some whites and some yellows in certain areas, and I'm like, oh, gotta put color back in, but I already went way too dark with the black, and the paper's already saturated to the point where you really can't layer anymore, and you can't really layer on top of black. I mean, you could kind of do it like I am right here with white, since white is pretty opaque, but with the other colors, not so much luck. And here's another part where I got super upset and frustrated. I'm taking off my masking fluid and I'm realizing that I didn't cover everything, so I have little black spots of ink in places where it shouldn't be. And I was pretty depressed after that. I was like, oh no, how am I gonna cover that up? Because inks will not cover that up. inks aren't opaque enough to cover that up. They're mostly transparent, so I had to think of something else. So I was pretty frustrated after I noticed that. I don't know. That usually happens when you're pretty new to masking fluid, like I was back then. Sometimes it's really hard to tell if everything's covered with the masking fluid. Especially if you're new to it. After you used it quite a bit and start to figure out what it looks like when everything's covered and when certain parts aren't. It just takes some time to get used to and to figure out. I eventually figured it out. I got a little method going to tell if everything's covered or not. It's just practice. That's all it takes. So the video is a little washed out on this part. You can't really see what I'm doing because the colors I'm using are really watered down and desaturated, so they really don't show up all that well the way I'm recording at this part. Whoops. Shit happens, I guess. I didn't notice while I was recording back then, but I think I fix it eventually. Actually, no, I definitely do fix it eventually so you can actually see what's going on. And, I actually experimented quite a bit with this one. I decided to mix inks and markers and colored pencils together. I actually didn't record the part where I tested the markers, or at the very least I edited it out. Because it did not work at all. I don't know if it was a combination of the ink and the watercolor paper, but the markers did not react well to something. They would get like stuck in the tooth of the paper, and I just didn't layer over the ink very well at all. So I ended up switching to just colored pencils to do my details, and honestly, I'm not sure why I relied so heavily on the colored pencils, because a lot of the shading and highlighting I'm doing right now, I could have easily done with just the ink. I'm honestly not sure why I didn't, looking back at it, because a lot of the stuff would have been honestly easier to do with ink. I don't know why I didn't. Honestly, I can see why I was so frustrated, because I made everything so much harder for myself. Like, why am I bothering with adding so much colored pencils to this when I could have just used ink and it would have been a lot quicker and easier to do, because using colored pencils on watercolor paper is really difficult because the tooth of the paper is so rough and textured, and it's really hard to get any kind of smooth layers with the colored pencil, so it would have been just easier for me if I used ink. Like, I don't understand why I used colored pencils or relied so heavily on colored pencils. I don't know what me from over a year ago was thinking when I was doing this, but honestly, I don't really think I was thinking at all. Oh, hey, look. I fixed the overexposure issue. I actually zoomed in a little bit and that fixed it all, so you can actually see what I'm doing now. Isn't that great? So now I'm going in just with the color pencils, and I'm using the colors blender, if you've noticed, to try to smooth out the color pencils as much as I can. Like I said, it's really hard to get a smooth layer with color pencils on watercolor paper, so I used that colorless marker as much as I could to smooth everything out. Honestly, just looking back at this, I'm pretty frustrated just looking at it. I'm just like, why? Why did I do that to myself? Why did I use color pencils so much? I could have just did half of this with ink. Actually, the majority of this with ink, and it would have been much easier on myself. Now, I'm not against using color pencils with ink. I actually do that quite a bit, but I usually just save the color pencils for very fine details. And I'll do that with markers sometimes too, so if I'm not covering a large area and I'm just putting little fine details here and here as finishing touches, that's fine. That goes over pretty well. I really have no problems with that, but it starts to become difficult when you're trying to cover larger areas. So now I'm going in and doing some emergency surgery to my painting. Like I said before, I got ink where it shouldn't have been, and the inks can't cover it up, and neither can the colored pencils. So I had to go in with some acrylic paint and try to cover up the little black spots as much as I could. I actually didn't think I recorded this part, but apparently I did. So here you go. You see me desperately trying to fix my mistakes that I made at the very beginning. Kind of sad when you think about it. This painting was pretty much doomed from the start. I screwed up as soon as I started, and the way masking fluid is, you really aren't gonna know until it's way too late to fix it. So, word for the wise, make sure that everything you want covered with the masking fluid is covered. If not, you will get paint where you don't want it, and then you'll have to desperately try to hide it like I'm doing right now. I think I hit it pretty well for the most part. Looking at it now, I think I covered up most of it. Though if I covered everything to begin with, I wouldn't have to worry about this right now. Oh well. This whole painting was a learning process. I was doing stuff that I normally never did before, and I was just learning from it, trying to figure out how certain mediums work together and how certain medias work with different types of papers, and I was really new to masking fluid, so this whole thing was a big experiment, and I can kind of understand why I made myself frustrated, but I also made things harder for myself too, so. So now I'm just doing a little bit of touch-ups with color pencils and adding in some more fine details with them. So this part, what I'm doing right now with the color pencils, I have no problem with. I completely understand why I did it. I'm just adding in fine little details here and there. I'm not really covering a large area with the color pencils. So this right here is what I would actually do now with color pencils on ink paintings. It would just be a final layer, some fine details, and I would only use it for like the final layer. I really wouldn't bother doing all the highlighting and shadows and all those large sections I did when I was coloring Spooky. Now, I would just do that all with ink. So I'm just about done doing some final little details with the gel pen. Oh, and here we are. All finished. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, and subscribe. And have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.